The Midnight Caller. My name is Emily Carter. I live alone in a modest, one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of Chicago. It's not much, but it's mine, and after years of roommates and chaos, I savor the solitude. Or at least, I used to. It started about 3 weeks ago. I was brushing my teeth one night when my phone buzzed on the counter. Midnight exactly. I frowned at the screen. A blocked number. I don't usually answer those, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hello?" I said, toothpaste still foaming in my mouth. There was nothing at first. Just silence. Then, heavy breathing. The kind that made my skin crawl. I hung up immediately, muttering something about prank calls and weirdos. The next night, it happened again. Midnight. Blocked number. Heavy breathing. Only this time, the call lasted longer. I could hear something faint. It sounded like a low chuckle, deep and guttural, before the line went dead. By the third night, I was officially freaked out. The breathing was more deliberate, louder, as though whoever it was wanted me to hear every inhale and exhale. I blocked the number, but that didn't help. Somehow, the calls kept coming through. "Who is this?" I demanded after a week of sleepless nights. "What do you want?" The breathing stopped. For a moment, I thought they had hung up. But then, a voice spoke. Low, gravelly, and unrecognizable. "Nice curtains." My heart stopped. My curtains? How could they know what my curtains looked like? My mind raced. Maybe they had seen photos of my apartment online. Maybe it was someone I knew messing with me. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. The next night, they described the painting on my living room wall. The mug on my coffee table. The shoes I'd kicked off near the door. Each detail sent a fresh wave of dread coursing through me. "How do you know this?" I whispered into the phone. "Are you watching me?" The voice laughed. A chilling, guttural laugh that echoed in my head long after I hung up. I called the police that night. 2 officers came by, a young guy named Officer Miller and a seasoned veteran named Officer Rodriguez. They searched the apartment thoroughly and found nothing out of the ordinary. No cameras, no signs of forced entry. They told me it was probably a prank and advised me to stay vigilant. But the calls didn't stop. In fact, they got worse. The voice described things that were impossible to see from outside my apartment, the book I was reading, the sweater I'd draped over the back of the couch. Details only someone inside could know. "I'm not crazy," I insisted when I called the police again. "Someone is in my apartment, or they've been here. Please, you have to do something." They humored me with another search. Again, nothing. They installed a temporary surveillance camera in my living room, promising to review the footage if anything suspicious happened. But the camera didn't catch anything. The calls continued. By the second week, I was a wreck. I barely slept. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the wind outside sent me spiraling. I started locking myself in my bedroom at night, a makeshift barricade of furniture against the door. But the calls still came. Midnight, like clockwork. One night, the voice said something that made my blood run cold. "You look so peaceful when you sleep." I froze. The breath caught in my throat. "What did you say?" The voice chuckled. "Your hair, it falls across your face just so. Beautiful." I hung up, shaking, and stared at my reflection in the dark screen of my phone. My sleep-deprived face stared back, pale and gaunt. I called the police again, tears streaming down my face. This time, they stayed longer. They checked every nook and cranny of my apartment, even the crawl space I hadn't dared to enter since moving in. But again, nothing. They suggested I stay with a friend or family member for a while, but I didn't have anyone nearby. My parents were in Florida, and most of my friends lived hours away. "You're not alone in this," Officer Miller said, his voice kind. "We'll catch whoever's doing this. Just hang tight." I nodded, but I didn't believe him. How could I? The calls felt otherworldly, like some unseen force was toying with me. I started questioning my sanity. Maybe I was losing it. Maybe I was imagining the whole thing. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a Friday. I'd fallen asleep on the couch after hours of nervously flipping through TV channels. The call woke me, as always, at midnight. My phone buzzed on the coffee table, the blocked number glowing ominously on the screen. I didn't answer it right away. Instead, I stared at it, my heart pounding. When I finally picked up, I didn't say anything. I just listened. The breathing was there, steady and deliberate. Then the voice spoke, soft and sinister. "You should check the closet." A chill ran down my spine. My eyes darted toward the hallway, where the bedroom closet loomed in darkness. "Why?" I whispered. The voice didn't answer. The line went dead. I sat frozen for what felt like an eternity. Then, slowly, I rose to my feet. My hands trembled as I grabbed a kitchen knife and made my way toward the bedroom. The air felt heavy, suffocating. My pulse thundered in my ears. I reached the closet and hesitated. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, to run. But I couldn't. I had to know. Summoning every ounce of courage, I yanked the door open. The closet was empty. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. As I turned back toward the bed, I saw it. A faint outline in the darkness. A figure. Tall and shadowy, standing at the foot of my bed. My scream echoed through the apartment as I lunged for the light switch. But when the room flooded with light, the figure was gone. My knife clattered to the floor as I collapsed, sobbing. I didn't sleep that night, or the nights that followed. The calls stopped after that. For a week, there was nothing. No blocked numbers, no creepy breathing. Just silence. I thought it was over. I hoped it was over. But deep down, I knew better. And I was right. A week after the calls ceased, I began to think I could reclaim my life. Sleep came easier, though the memories lingered, a constant reminder of the terror I had endured. But as the days passed, my cautious optimism gave way to unease. It started with small things. The coffee mug I had left on the counter in the morning was suddenly on the table when I returned home. The chair I had pushed under the dining table was slightly pulled out. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I had simply forgotten. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. One night, as I was locking the front door, I noticed scratches around the keyhole. Faint but fresh. My stomach dropped. Someone had been trying to get in. I called the police again, but without any definitive evidence, there was little they could do. "It's probably just wear and tear," Officer Miller said, though his tone lacked conviction. The next few nights were uneventful, and I almost convinced myself that he was right. Until the smell started. It was faint at first, a sickly sweet odor I couldn't place. I scrubbed the kitchen, emptied the trash, and scoured the bathroom, but the smell persisted. It grew stronger each day, filling the apartment with its cloying presence. By the end of the week, it was unbearable. Desperate, I searched every inch of the apartment, determined to find the source. It wasn't until I opened the air vent in the bedroom that I found it. A small, crumpled piece of paper, stained and reeking. I unfolded it with trembling hands. Written in smudged, uneven letters were 3 words. I'm still here. My knees buckled as I read the note, the reek from the paper mingling with the sour taste of fear in my throat. I stumbled back and dropped the note as though it had burned me. I could hear my own ragged breathing, matching the rhythm of the calls I'd endured for weeks. I called Officer Miller immediately, clutching the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. "You need to come back," I stammered. I found something in the vent. It's a note. Someone's been in here. They're watching me. Miller's voice was steady, but I could hear the tension beneath it. "Stay where you are, Emily. Lock yourself in a room and don't touch anything. We're on our way." I did as he said, retreating to the bathroom and locking the door. My heart was racing so fast I thought it might burst. I clutched my phone like a lifeline, waiting for the knock at the door. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant sound from the street made me jump. When the police arrived, I nearly cried with relief. Miller and Rodriguez entered cautiously, guns drawn, as they swept the apartment. I stayed outside, shivering in the hallway, while they searched. They found nothing, again. But this time, they didn't dismiss me outright. The note was evidence, they said, though they couldn't determine how it had ended up in the vent. Miller promised to file an official report and have someone monitor my building more closely. "It's not much, but we'll do what we can," he said, his hand briefly touching my shoulder. "Stay alert, Emily." It wasn't enough to reassure me. Nothing would be. Not anymore. The next few days passed in a haze. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I jumped at every sound, every shadow. I knew someone had been in my apartment. I felt it. And though the police couldn't find any evidence of a break-in, I couldn't shake the sense that I was being watched. I started keeping a knife in my pocket at all times. At night, I slept with it under my pillow. But no amount of preparation could make me feel safe. The note haunted me. I'm still here. What did it mean? Where was the caller now? One night, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I couldn't just sit and wait for something to happen. I had to do something. I borrowed a friend's old security camera and set it up in the living room, pointing toward the hallway that led to my bedroom. If someone was coming into my apartment, I was going to catch them. The first 2 nights, the footage showed nothing unusual. Just me pacing the apartment, sitting on the couch, staring at the walls. But on the 3rd night, something changed. I was sitting on the couch, reading a book, when the screen on my phone lit up with a call from a blocked number. My stomach turned as I stared at it, my fingers frozen above the screen. Against my better judgment, I answered. "What do you want?" I hissed, my voice trembling. Silence. Then, the voice, "Look behind you." Every hair on my body stood on end. I dropped the phone and spun around, my eyes scanning the empty room. Nothing. I grabbed the knife from my pocket and crept toward the hallway, my heart pounding in my ears. The camera's recording was still running. It caught everything. As I disappeared into the hallway, a figure emerged from the shadows in the living room. It was faint at first, a barely perceptible movement near the edge of the frame. But as it stepped into view, it became clear. A man, tall and thin, wearing dark clothes. He moved with a deliberate, almost predatory grace. He stood in the center of the room, watching the hallway where I had vanished. Then, slowly, he turned toward the camera. His face was obscured by a mask, white, featureless, and horrifying in its simplicity. He tilted his head, as if studying the lens, and raised a single finger to his lips in a gesture of silence. And then, he was gone. I didn't see the footage until the next morning. I hadn't returned to the living room that night. After searching the hallway and finding nothing, I had locked myself in the bedroom until dawn. When I finally had the courage to check the camera, my blood ran cold. I played the video over and over, unable to believe what I was seeing. He had been in my apartment. He had been there, watching me. And I hadn't even known. I called the police immediately. Miller and Rodriguez arrived within minutes, and this time, they didn't question my story. The footage was undeniable. They promised to increase patrols around my building and suggested I stay somewhere else for a while. But where could I go? My parents were states away, and I didn't have close friends nearby. I decided to stay in a hotel for a few nights, just to clear my head and figure out my next steps. The hotel was a small, nondescript place a few miles from my apartment. It wasn't fancy, but it felt safer than staying home. I spent the first night staring out the window, jumping at every sound from the hallway. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I received a text message from an unknown number. My heart sank as I read the words. "You can't hide from me." The phone slipped from my hands. How had they found me? I hadn't told anyone where I was staying. Panic set in as I realized the truth. They weren't just watching me. They were following me. I called the police again, but there was little they could do. Without a clear suspect, they couldn't track the messages. Miller advised me to change my number and stay vigilant. That night, as I lay in the unfamiliar bed, my mind raced with questions. Who was this person? Why were they tormenting me? And, most terrifying of all, what were they planning to do next? The answer came sooner than I expected. It was midnight when the knock came at the door. 3 sharp, deliberate raps that echoed through the quiet room. My breath caught in my throat as I stared at the door, frozen. "Emily," a voice called softly. It was low and familiar. The voice from the calls. "I know you're in there." I grabbed the knife from the bedside table and backed away, my heart pounding. The voice chuckled. "You can't run forever, Emily. I'll always find you." The doorknob rattled, and I screamed, pressing my back against the far wall. Seconds later, the sound of footsteps retreated down the hall, leaving me trembling in silence. The nightmare wasn't over. It was only just beginning. A note. "Someone's been in here. They're watching me." Miller's voice was calm, but his urgency was unmistakable. "Stay put, Emily. Lock your doors, don't touch anything. We're on our way." I hung up and retreated to the bathroom, locking myself inside. My thoughts raced as I tried to piece together how someone could have gotten into my apartment. The air vent? But it was far too small for a person. And yet, the note. When Miller and Rodriguez arrived, they conducted another thorough search of my apartment. They opened every cabinet, checked behind every piece of furniture, and even inspected the air vents with a flashlight. As before, they found nothing. But this time, they didn't dismiss me outright. The note was chilling, undeniable evidence that someone had been in my home. "I'm assigning officers to patrol the building at night," Miller said. "And we're going to dust for prints around the vent and door." His words offered little comfort. Whoever this was, they had managed to slip through every layer of security without leaving a trace. What could a few patrols do? The following night, I stayed with my neighbor, Carla. She was a kind woman in her 40s who had seen me spiraling over the past few weeks. She didn't ask questions when I knocked on her door with an overnight bag, my face pale and drawn. She simply let me in. Carla's guest room was small but cozy, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a shred of safety. I fell asleep to the faint hum of the street outside, clutching my phone like a lifeline. At midnight, I woke to the sound of my ringtone. My heart sank as I saw the blocked number glowing on the screen. No, I whispered, my voice trembling. Not here. I answered, my hand shaking. What do you want from me? The voice was different this time, hoarser, almost gleeful. You can run, Emily. But you can't hide. The line went dead. I burst into tears, clutching the phone to my chest. Carla rushed in, alarmed, and I told her everything. She called the police on my behalf, and they arrived within minutes. The officers assured me that they'd investigate, but I could see the skepticism in their eyes. Another prank call. Another dead end. That night, Carla insisted I sleep in her room while she took the couch. I didn't argue. But as I lay there, staring at the ceiling, unease settled over me. The room felt off. I couldn't pinpoint why, but something wasn't right. I got up to use the bathroom, my bare feet padding softly against the carpet. As I reached for the light switch, my gaze flicked to the mirror. And I froze. A figure stood behind me, barely visible in the dim light. It was tall and lean, its face obscured by the same featureless white mask I had seen in the footage. My scream caught in my throat as I spun around, my hand fumbling for the doorknob. The room was empty. I backed out of the bathroom, my heart pounding, and grabbed my phone. I dialed Miller, my fingers shaking so badly I could barely hit the buttons. He's here, I whispered. He's in Carla's apartment. Miller and his team arrived within minutes, but once again, they found nothing. Carla was shaken but supportive, insisting I stay with her until this nightmare was over. The officers stayed longer this time, questioning Carla and canvassing the building for witnesses. Still, no one had seen anything unusual. Miller pulled me aside before leaving. Emily, I need you to think. Is there anyone who might have a grudge against you? Someone from your past, maybe? An ex-boyfriend, a coworker? I shook my head. No. I mean, I've had disagreements, but nothing like this. I don't understand why this is happening. His brow furrowed. We'll keep looking. In the meantime, try to stay somewhere public, hotels, shelters, anywhere with people around. I nodded, though I didn't think it would make a difference. Whoever this was, they weren't deterred by locks, cameras, or company. They would find me. The next day, I decided to leave town. I packed a bag, withdrew cash from the bank, and drove aimlessly, desperate to put as much distance as possible between myself and Chicago. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, not even Carla. I didn't want to risk being followed. I ended up in a small motel miles from anywhere. The room was shabby but clean, with a single bed and a window overlooking the parking lot. I kept the curtains drawn and the lights low, my phone turned off. For the first time in weeks, I felt invisible. But at midnight, I woke to a knock at the door. My blood ran cold as I sat up, clutching the sheets. The knock came again, louder this time. Emily, a voice called softly. It was the same voice from the calls, low and gravelly. I know you're in there. I didn't respond. I didn't move. I barely breathed. The doorknob rattled, and my heart leapt into my throat. I scrambled for my phone, realizing too late that it was still off. By the time I powered it on and dialed 911, the footsteps were already retreating down the hall. When the police arrived, they found no one. The surveillance footage from the motel's cameras showed nothing but an empty hallway. I was alone. Again. As I write this, I'm sitting in another motel, far from the last one. I don't know how much longer I can keep running. I don't know what this person wants or why they've chosen me. All I know is that they're always watching, always waiting. And no matter where I go, they'll find me. As I write this, I am holed up in another nondescript motel, miles away from where this nightmare began. My hands are trembling, my thoughts a tangled mess. Every shadow outside my window feels like a threat, every distant sound a prelude to the horror I've come to expect. I've tried to piece together a coherent narrative, to make sense of what's happening, but the truth is, I'm no closer to understanding than I was when the calls first started. All I know is that I am being hunted, and there's no escape. Last night, I decided I couldn't keep running. Running meant being alone, isolated, vulnerable. I needed to find answers, and the only way to do that was to face this head-on. I spent the day driving aimlessly, trying to shake the feeling that I was being watched. Eventually, I found myself back in Chicago. Back at my apartment. Back where it all started. The place felt alien as I stepped inside, like a crime scene preserved in time. Dust coated the surfaces, and the air was heavy with abandonment. But something was different. Subtle, but undeniable. The chair I had left in the corner was slightly askew. A faint indentation marred the couch cushion, as though someone had recently sat there. My heart raced as I realized the truth, someone had been here. Summoning every ounce of courage, I began a systematic search of the apartment. Every closet, every drawer, every shadowed corner was meticulously checked. The air vents, the crawl space, even beneath the floorboards where they could be lifted. But there was nothing. Nothing except an oppressive sense of being watched. And then I found the photograph. It was lying on my pillow, as though placed there deliberately. A Polaroid, slightly faded, depicting me in my bedroom. The angle was unmistakable, it had been taken from inside the apartment. My blood turned to ice as I flipped it over. Scrawled on the back in uneven letters was a single word, soon. My hands shook as I called Officer Miller, my voice barely audible as I recounted what I had found. He arrived within minutes, bringing a team with him this time. They combed through the apartment with a fine-tooth comb, taking the photograph as evidence and reassuring me that they would analyze it for fingerprints. But even as Miller spoke, his words calm and measured, I could see the unease in his eyes. He believed me now, that much was clear. But he also knew the truth neither of us wanted to say out loud, they were always one step ahead. I spent the night at the police station, surrounded by the buzz of activity and the constant hum of fluorescent lights. It wasn't comforting, but it was better than being alone. Miller stayed late, sitting across from me with a coffee cup in hand as I recounted every detail of the past few weeks. He listened intently, his expression unreadable. "We'll catch them, Emily," he said eventually, his voice firm. "This kind of thing can't go on forever. Whoever they are, they'll slip up." But I couldn't share his optimism. Every instinct screamed that this was bigger than a simple stalker. There was an almost supernatural quality to their actions, an ability to anticipate every move I made. Whoever they weren't just slipping into my apartment. They were slipping into my mind, dismantling my sense of reality piece by piece. The next morning, I returned to the apartment, flanked by 2 officers who insisted on doing a final sweep before leaving me alone. It was clean. Sterile, almost. As if whoever had been here had scrubbed away every trace of their presence. But I knew they'd be back. And I was determined to be ready. I installed a new set of locks, added a deadbolt, and placed a chair beneath the doorknob every time I closed it. I borrowed motion-activated cameras and set them up in every room, their tiny lenses unblinking sentinels. I slept with the knife under my pillow and a flashlight within reach. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of control. But it didn't last. The calls started again that night. Midnight, as always. I answered, my voice steady despite the terror clawing at my insides. "What do you want?" Silence. Then, the sound of footsteps. Not distant or faint, but close. Too close. As though they were inside the apartment. My breath hitched as I scanned the room, the phone pressed to my ear. "I'm not afraid of you," I said, forcing steel into my voice. The laughter that followed was cold and hollow. "You should be." The line went dead. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in the living room, clutching the knife and staring at the front door. The minutes dragged into hours, each tick of the clock a reminder of my solitude. But the cameras recorded nothing. The locks remained unbroken. The apartment was eerily quiet, save for the pounding of my heart. And then, just before dawn, the smell returned. Faint at first, barely noticeable. But it grew stronger, a sickly sweet odor that filled the apartment and turned my stomach. I searched desperately for the source, tearing through cabinets and drawers. Finally, I found it, another note, tucked beneath the couch cushion. This one was longer, the letters scrawled in the same uneven hand. "You can't stop me. You can't escape. I am everywhere. Watching. Waiting. Soon." I dropped the note as though it burned me, backing away until I hit the wall. My vision swam as the implications sank in. This wasn't just a game to them. It was a promise. The police arrived within minutes of my call, their faces grim as they took the note and questioned me yet again. Miller's calm demeanor was gone, replaced by something darker. "We'll station someone outside your apartment," he said. "Around the clock. You won't be alone." But even as he spoke, I knew it wouldn't matter. Whoever they were, they wouldn't stop. Not until they had what they wanted. And I had no idea what that was. Now, as I sit here writing this, the sun is setting outside my window. The shadows are growing longer, creeping across the walls like living things. I can feel their presence, even though I can't see them. The cameras are running, the doors are locked, and the knife is within arm's reach. But none of it feels like enough. Because deep down, I know the truth. This isn't over. It will never be over. Midnight is coming.